Welcome to another match preview here on Stones TV and the Maidstone United podcast, where we look ahead to our latest return league home game as the days and the games keep chipping away. At the end of this season, it is of course Chippenham Town. So before we look ahead to Chippenham, we must look back on the last week and the last gasp draw at home to Dorking on Tuesday. But before that, it's another goalless draw on the road, and this time that was at Hornchurch. Everything but the end product, really. It's not a great game of football. Numerous comments about the state of the pitch from spectators and players alike. They're a side with about 1 defeat in 9, I think it is. It's somewhere you should go and win if you want to be a championship winning side. I think that ship sailed though, from a Stones perspective, and it's now all about momentum for the playoffs. Staying in them at present is the main thing, of course, but then the Dorking result, one of those games that nearly did get away from us, the Stones, on Tuesday, like quite a few have done already this season. But the noise and the relief when that equaliser went in, the own goal, it was palpable. It felt like it could be another one of those moments at the Gallagher that lifts the side through the last 8 games of the league season proper. A defeat, in my mind at least, would have been nearing catastrophic, because Western, they've been closer. They would have been even closer if that result had stayed as it was, 1-0 Dorking. But fortunately, the Stones did get that equaliser. It's still uncomfortably close, to be honest, with Western. But we have to believe that the Stones can hold their nerve now, having been in this position pretty much every time we've been in National League South over the last decade or so. And just another brief word, as always, for the crowd, the noise. George said it in the post-match on Tuesday night. It's a great atmosphere made by both sets of fans. Credit to Dorking as well. And shooting towards the Genko in that second half, almost always reaps a benefit, hoovering that ball into the net. So more of that again over the weekend, please, and the rest of the season, of course. The message from everyone at the club to all of you out there. Hashtag never dull in South. Hashtag a couple of gaps here or thereabouts opening up now. It does look like, unless one or two sides slip up ahead of us, which they could well do, there's still possibility, still time, but it's getting less and less, isn't it? We may well get stranded in 7th, potentially. I don't know who predicted us winning the league a few weeks ago. I'd ignore him. That would mean we would need to lean on that away record, I feel, quite heavily to get promoted through the playoffs, because we'd be in the lower half of that 2nd to 7th place conundrum that we'd like to be in at the end of April. But again, that gap to Western's the most important thing now, in my mind again at least. I'm sure many will say that we need to look up the table and not over our shoulders, and Mike and the Mechanics once said. Again, Western match at the start of April next month. It's going to be a massive match for the Stones. Regardless of the Chippenham result, we're going to be 7th or 8th, depending if we drop points and Western get their win at the weekend. That's likely to be the case all the way up to that Western clash on April 5th. Unless one of those sides above us starts to falter critically, we can but hope and see if the Stones can just nerdle their way up the table a little bit more. But it's going to take back-to-back defeats as well, and just frankly no one's been doing that in the top 6 or 7 in recent weeks, so it does seem a hard push to get us higher than we currently are, but don't rule it out. So finally to Chippenham, and we'll start as usual with their comings and goings since the last game. And for such a long gap between matches, it's a relatively short list, you'll be possibly pleased to hear. Forward Leon Gravata joined on a month's loan back in September before having it extended through to the end of the 24-25 season. Midfielder Rex Mannings was loaned out to Chippenham Town for the rest of the season. Fellow midfielder Jake Evans went out on loan to Gloucester City just before Christmas. Striker Hamzad Kalgbo joined the Bluebirds on loan a couple of months ago from Newport County. Both midfielder Pele Koseo and defender Lewis Colwell joined Basingstoke Town on dual registration and loan respectively at the end of January. Midfielder Joe Andrews signed a new 2-year contract at the end of January. That was just days before League One side Peterborough United signed him on a permanent transfer and immediately loaned him back for the rest of this season. He turned 19 last month. Young defender Jack Poffley signed a multi-year deal on Valentine's Day. Midfielder Tom Mayhew put pen to paper for next season on that same date, so a double date if you will. to extend his second spell at the club. He scored on his debut with a rocket at home to Maidstone several years ago, you may well recall. He's in the middle of his best scoring season in his career as well. Josie Casagrande, yes, the big house man, we remember him from earlier in the season. He's joined on an emergency month's loan to cover in goal for Will Henry. Most recent transfer at time of recording saw the departure of Will Dawes to Weston-super-Mare, who we've already mentioned on the pod today. So in spite of the loss of some big names, they have coped remarkably well with their mid-table position, and that Will Dawes transfer for me again is a prime example of bigger clubs, I have to do the inverted commas, bigger clubs coming and poaching players from sides lower down, and that's no disrespect to Chippenham, of course. We all know and respect their setup. They're a very well run club, but again, they find themselves finishing in the top half potentially, very outside better for the playoffs, as most teams outside the top 8 are now. But again, it's the limited resources. They do have a very wide catchment area, so they're always able to bring these players in. There's always players down in the southwest, always looking for professional men's football. And it's very similar to the Eastbourne transfer the other month as well, where the kid went to Middlesbrough. So I don't think it was exactly a six-figure sum, but it was still a established EFL club taking on one of their youngsters who hadn't had too much experience. So it's certainly a theme that's developing. Some of these non-league startlets that are in the south and north regions being jettisoned up into youth academies for some quite ridiculous money. So yeah, if there's any willing punters out there who need to look at a Stones Academy player, I mean, there's a load of them training out there at the moment, so Venmo. So the key men for the Bluebirds this season, the aforementioned Will Henry has 9 clean sheets in between the sticks. Defender Luke Haynes has made the most appearances at the back and helped Henry to that number of aforementioned clean sheets, as well as 2 goals in 2 wins so far this season. Tom Mayhew, I mentioned, it's been his best scoring season. He has 6 so far, more goals than the rest of his career combined before this season. His last goal was last month, back in February, in a 2-0 win against Chesham, part of a run of 4 goals in 7 league games at the turn of the year for Tom. Leon Gravata also has 6 goals this season. His most recent was the opener at Eastbourne Borough a week or so ago. And Harry Parsons, he's the club's top scorer, although he hasn't scored in over a month now. His last strike also against Chesham in that 2-0 home win. So a lot of these players have been here from the start of this season, and they showed in our last meeting they do know how to cause the Stones some problems. And yeah, I was down there back in August, not the best match. Showed from both sides that they'd only had a couple of weeks into the season. You know, everybody was still finding their link-ups, relationships. I'm intrigued though about the goalkeeper loan signing. I'm assuming that it must be an injury to Will Henry, which frankly would be a big blow because his fitness would be crucial to a late playoff run in my view, because you know, the big house loanee, he's had the 2 matches so far that have been against Eastbourne and Truro, contenders like ourselves, and you are hoping that the Stones could match a similar resultant scoreline. Nothing against the keeper, of course, we know he's a very good keeper, but it's just having that relationship, that time with the defensive line that Will Henry has obviously had until very recently. So that could be something that that George and his squad could be focusing on. And another thing I'm intrigued by is Gravata and Parsons. You know, they've been scoring the goals so far this season. It's in the reach of the top half. Very intrigued to see how they're going to link up on Saturday, and that might continue seeing them push up the table, because I mean, anybody could finish 9th, I think, realistically, out of about 7 or 8 teams at the moment, like Hemel, Chelmsford, Tunbridge. They're all in that pack, and it's very intriguing, you know, next best place outside of the top 8, and Chippenham do look well equipped to potentially see themselves there or thereabouts come the end of April. So our opponents' form since last we met: Chippenham were knocked out 1-0 in their 3rd qualifying round replay in the FA Cup. That was at Weston-super-Mare. Chesham knocked them out in the 2nd round of the FA Trophy. So that means they've played 34 games since last we met in the league, 17 each at home and away. Their home record shows only 5 wins, 3 draws and 9 defeats, but it's on the road. They've had 8 wins, 3 draws and 6 defeats. So it does look like they have really progressed when it comes to establishing that away form. They're currently sitting 7th this season for their away form. It's just a couple of points behind the Stones. So they know how to get it done on the road. Some other standout results include draws against Tunbridge and Truro, and they have won at Slough, Hampton, Richmond, Boreham Wood, Weston-super-Mare and Hornchurch. So George and his team are certainly not going to be taking them lightly. The Stones' home form has now matched their away form for the points tally. It's 32 points on the road and at home. So there's potentially some comfort at least to potentially see some more points at home between now and the end of April in those last 4 Stones home games of the regular season before potential need to step up that away form again come the playoffs, as and when we hopefully make it there. So if you can't remember all the players from the previous meeting, and it was August, so I can't say I blame you, then why not head back to our previous preview video and podcast from this season for more information on Saturday's opponents. The links to the video and podcast are both in the description below. And if you can't make it to the Gallagher on Saturday, be sure to tune in to myself alongside Fred Atkins from 2:40 on Stones Live. You'll see us on the hot take and then hear us in the highlights once they go online. And finally, another quick diary note for Maidstone United's women. They host Hollands and Blair in the DFDS Kent Plate semi-final. It's a 3:15 kickoff on Sunday, so just literally 24 hours after the men's game against Chippenham. We're all hoping that it becomes the penultimate game of their season now that their league campaign finished at Cray Wanderers last weekend. We and they would love to see as many of you down here as possible to roar them on to a place in a potential final. So last time we played Chippenham, it was 0-0, and that result was part of our great away run at the start of this season. And the sun was out. Looking at it today, some might say there have been a few too many 0-0s potentially. But at least the sun's out again. Yeah? Here's hoping the return game is even just slightly more eventful and positive for the Stones as they battle for those last available points for the playoff spots. Our thanks to you all out there as ever for watching or listening to the latest preview. Like and subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. You know what to do. Maidstone United podcast. Put it in the search. You'll find it where you get your podcasts. That's all you need to do. See or hear you for our next preview ahead of the return league game over at Hampton and Richmond. And as always, come on you Stones.